Welcome back to MVM. We are fresh out of Gen Con and have a brand new release from Fantasy Flight Games. This one is called Final Hour. It is a brand new addition to the Arkham horror line, a 1 to 4 player cooperative game in which each of the players is representing one of the investigators trying to shut down a ritual.
Yeah, and this ritual needs to be reversed and quickly because otherwise more monsters are spawning, they're coming out, they're destroying the buildings, and ultimately hurting you and potentially killing the investigators trying to stop this havoc from happening.
So there is a lot of variability right from the start of the game. First thing you're going to notice that there are 3 different ancient ones that you can bring into play. Depending upon which one of these that you bring into play, it's going to determine a number of different factors. On the back side of each one of these cards, it's going to tell you how to set up the board. This board is going to show you where the ritual took place within Arkham. It's going to show you the 3 different gates where monsters are going to spawn into, and it's going to show you where the monsters are going to begin, plus where all the investigators will start their journey. Also, it's going to allow you to, on the other side, tell you all the abilities that can trigger off of some of the omens that will come into play through the course of the game. We'll talk about these a little bit more in depth in a moment. You're going to notice the setup of the board, and as we said, there's a number of different monsters out here. There's 4 different types of regular monsters, and then there's 4 different types of special monsters. Each of these have different abilities built into them when the monster phase triggers. Also on the board, you're going to notice a number of different clue tokens. This game is all about trying to find the right clues in order to reverse the ritual. And in order to do that, you're going to notice this thing down on the bottom of the board. The whole game revolves around this, because in 8 rounds, you have to figure out what that code is, so to speak. That code is going to be made up of these 2 clues. And on the back side of them, you won't know what these are at the start of the game, but they're going to represent 2 of these possible combinations. The rest of these clues, adding up to a total of 10 spaces, are hidden here on the board. So as you start to deduce some of these different areas on the board, you're going to start locking them down into areas down here in order to find out what those 2 hidden clues are that you'll never be able to know until you want to do the ritual itself.
So the cool thing about that is that you can choose to do the ritual sooner. You don't have to wait till that final 8th round. That's like your last-ditch effort round. If you think you know it sooner, something is giving you the indication earlier in your gameplay, you can go ahead and attempt the ritual sooner if you want and try and shut down these monsters before they completely get out of control.
All right, so to play the game, it's very simple. We've already set up the board. We'll talk about more of the components as we get into the game. However, everyone's going to choose one of the characters. Each character is going to have 10 of these action cards in front of them. You're going to randomly shuffle these together to make your deck of cards. Each player is also going to draw 4 of these priority cards. When you look at the priority cards, we'll talk about them a little bit more in depth. However, they're going to have numbers, unique numbers on the top left and bottom right corner of the cards. They're going to have either 0 through 2 omens, which are these eye-shaped icons on the center, and then they're going to have a ritual icon on the bottom left-hand side. All of these things are extremely important as you play the game. However, for now, just draw 4 of these up into your hand. Then you're going to stack the number of gate tokens, which is equal to 8. That means there's going to be 8 rounds in the game and 8 rounds only. If you aren't able to close that ritual portal by the end of the 8th round, you guys are going to lose. There's a variety of different ways that you can lose this game. Also, to start, you're going to simply go through the different actions on your turn, starting with the lead investigator. The lead investigator can be any one of the characters at the table. They're going to have that little token in front of them that Kira's holding up. And then you're going to go through the actions. The action phase is actually very simple for the investigator. Starting with that lead investigator, they're going to draw 1 card off the top of their deck, and they're going to look at that card.
Yeah, and the cards are multi-use, so depending on how they're played, and honestly, this whole entire part of the game is pretty difficult because you cannot talk. There's no table talk during this portion of the game. So these action cards have 2 sections, the top half and the bottom half. The top half is generally something you want to have happen, and the bottom half is something you're going to potentially have to do and is going to have a bad effect, spawning monsters either at your location or an entire section of the board.
Each player in a 4-player game is going to draw 1 of their cards off the top of their deck, and they're going to make a decision just solely based off of that card and using one of the 4 priority cards in their hand. No one else is going to know what they're deciding at that point. In a 4-player game, each player is going to do this one time by taking one of their priority cards, just as Kira said, and laying that card on top of it with only the priority number showing. That's going to determine how these trigger. In a 2-player game, each player will play 2 of their cards once in front of them, so each player is having 2 of their cards activated. What all this means is by the end of the phase, each player is going to have cards, or potentially 1, 2, cards in front of them, depending upon the number of players, showing that priority number on top. Then you're going to trigger all 4 cards. So at the end of the round, there are going to be 4 cards on the table, and you're going to look at these priority numbers and see who goes first. All these have unique numbers on them. The first 2 lower numbers are going to activate the top parts of their cards. The last 2 lower numbers are going to have to activate the bottom parts of their cards. Remember, there is no table talk at all in this. So being last in the turn order may give you a little bit of advantage by seeing which numbers have been played and whether you can play the top or the bottom part of your card. You're always trying to make the best decision according to those cards. And these cards have a wide range of different abilities on them. They allow you to move. They allow you to destroy some of the monsters. They allow you to place sealed tokens out onto the board that are basically barricades. A lot of them are going to allow you to search, too, in the locations where you're located, to investigate these areas by flipping them over and seeing what's on the back side of them. Typically, all of these are going to be these ritual icons, which you want to find throughout the game. However, some of them may be keys that are going to give you very specific items that you can use within the game itself. Each player is going to do that according to where they fall in those number lines on their priority cards.
Not only are you paying attention to the number on your priority card, you're also paying attention to these eyes, which are called omens. The amount of those that are played during the round are going to determine what happens with the old one.
Yeah, so each of these old ones is going to have a graph on them that's going to show you what is going to trigger during the monster phase, depending upon the number of omens that were revealed as a group at the table. The higher the number, the worst thing that's going to happen. A lot of these are going to introduce special monsters on the board. They're going to introduce damage to the board, a wide variety of different things. They're just going to create havoc within Arkham that are going to hurt the players and slow down their progress. Again, what you're trying to do is destroy these monsters on the board and not allow them to flood very specific areas. So this game has a very pandemic feel to it when it's the monster's turn, because a lot of these monsters can flood into other locations on the board. You're going to notice a number of different paths where the investigators can move around and interact with those particular buildings on the board. However, you're going to see a number of different colored arrows, either red or blue, that are going to provide movement for those monsters that come in red and blue forms. This is all done with the end of the round phase for the monsters. You're going to flip over one of the gate tokens, and those gate tokens are going to represent one of the 3 different gates that are already pre-existing on the board during setup. Depending upon the number of gate tokens that are now existing in that location is how many random monsters you're going to pull from the bag and then flood those particular locations. If those locations are full, they're going to spread out to other locations depending upon the color that are going to overflow. And this can have a cascade effect to the board, meaning more areas are going to flood throughout the game. Also, each of these monsters may have a special ability built into them. One of the other ways that the players can lose the game is, in fact, where the ritual is originally taking place. If that is flooded with monsters by the end of the round, players can lose that way as well. The last thing the players can do on the turn is they can actually try to guess what that ritual is. And you can do that at the very first round of the game, or you can actually do it at the very final part of the game as well. It's up to you as a team.
And that's the other place that the priority cards come into play. There is also a little icon that matches the icons you see on the tokens on the board. You are going to want to have the number of these double the amount of investigators in the game. And so you're going to be holding on to these as well, hoping to have the right icons when it's time to do the ritual. So you're juggling between what I'm going to play on my action card, which ones are going to have the omens and how hard that's going to hit us with the monsters, and then, of course, what we want to use in the ritual.
Yeah, so the ritual itself is very easy to do. Each player is going to contribute 3 of their cards to a common pool. You're going to shuffle all those cards up so you have no idea who contributed what, and you're going to have 2 times the number of players. So in a 2-player game with Kira and I, we just have to have 4 icons that match whatever these 2 are going to be when they're revealed at the very end of the game. If we do so, we win. If we don't, we're going to lose the game. Overall, that's how you play the game. So let's get directly into our review. Most of the Arkham games we played, you playing the LCG, me playing Arkham and Eldritch and all these other type of games, they're heavier, meatier games that take a lot of time to get into, especially the FFG related ones. This is more in the line of Elder Sign, which is the dice game from them that is a very easy game to learn, but has a lot of difficulty built into the game initially.
Oh, absolutely. So I think one of the things that caught my attention when the announcement came out about this game was that it can be played in 30 to 60 minutes. I've never played an Arkham game that lasts less than 60 minutes. I don't even know I've ever played an Arkham game that is 60 minutes. So that being said, it does still feel very much like any of the Arkham games in the FFG line. And one of the things that, to just push that further, the scaling on whether or not it's easy, medium, or hard, we played on easy both times that we've played so far, and it is absolutely still very difficult to win that game, and you're very likely going to lose the first few times you play.
Absolutely. The variability in the game built in, you just nailed it. There are 3 different ancient ones, and each of these ancient ones have 3 different levels of difficulty built in that all are going to introduce different unique powers for those, depending upon the number of omens that you're using. So right from the start, you're going to have a large amount of variety in the game, depending upon how punishing you want the game to be. And as you said, the game is punishing right from the start. It's a very challenging and hard game to master. But on the flip side, it's very easy to learn.
Absolutely.
This game is super simple. All it is you playing a card in secret face down and using one of your priority cards to look around the table and best guess which of those 2 options, the top or the bottom, are going to act. And that's the crux of the game, trying to program your card to work in the right time. Sometimes it's going to be a great outcome for you. Sometimes it's going to move things in positions that you had no intention of doing so.
Yeah, the lack of table talk during the action selection phase really makes the game that much more difficult, because you're trying to mind meld, if you will, with the other players at the table, figuring out, okay, well, and picking the best course of action. Sometimes you may ultimately choose to play the higher card instead of the lower number, because you can see clearly that your counterparts at the table want to play something lower, and you want to allow them to do that because they may have a plan, but you don't get to discuss it. So that is another added layer of difficulty for this game.
All right, so let's get into the negatives of the game. I have a 1 negative and 1 negative only, really, is that it does feel a little bit random. There are times in the game, just like you had mentioned, that you are trying to program a card to happen. And if you're the first player in that turn order, you may not get the action that you want to happen. And in a 2-player game, that's going to happen twice to you, possibly, just depending upon the priority cards that you have, because at the end of every one of your turns, you're drawing a new priority card to go back up to 4. Sometimes you may have a hand of all high numbers, like 20 through 30. What are you supposed to do in those situations other than hope that someone may have a higher 20 than you, and there's nothing really you can do but to play off? That can be a little bit frustrating, because you want to use your actions, you want to program the right type of things to happen for you, but it's not 100% perfect knowledge at the table at any given time.
Pretty much the same negative I have for the LCG, which is things get a little bit messy and hard to follow here. Yes, we have arrows, we have things guiding us along, but there's a lot happening on here, and having to keep track of where the seals are, where the walkways are. The more stuff that gets out on the board, it's a little harder to track, but I do like how the arrows are helping you along. It's just a little bit, sometimes when you have so many tokens on the board, it's hard to track everything.
Especially late game when it's just flooded with stuff out there. So guys, that is Final Hour from FFG. It's a really fast-paced Arkham experience. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do. And we'll catch you guys next time.